All right, welcome everyone to another live stream of the Raw Prospect Podcast. This is episode 162 for our second annual Masters preview and our fourth annual mock draft, I believe. And joining me, as always, the Stat King himself, Michael Ween. What's up, man?
Pimento cheese. The Masters starts tomorrow. Pimento cheese sandwiches and chicken biscuits, I believe, is what they eat there for breakfast. Cheap menu. I saw Scotty Scheffler's Champions Dinner menu, which is pretty interesting. It's always interesting to see when that comes out every year, what each person chooses to make and whether or not I would actually maybe like it or not. And I'm interested to know like the dynamics within that room. Like if Tiger wins the Masters and he makes something, like do the live guys hate what the PGA guys make? I mean, I don't know. I just wonder what goes on in that room because not everyone likes the same things. So
Yeah, we all do. We all do. I
we
mean,
are going to get right into the content today. Episode 162. I want to start real fast up into about the 10-minute mark talking about some Masters storylines. And then we can get into our Masters player draft pool where we're each going to draft 6 players for the sake of time. We haven't decided on the real criteria yet, but I think the 5 lowest scores will count towards
right.
a cumulative score, which lowest score between us at the end of the Masters wins. However, I'm not sure we have decided if one person actually gets the winner, if that overrides everything. We haven't discussed that yet. So, but let's waste no more time. Biggest storylines you're watching for this week are?
I'm watching Tiger. I mean, any tournament he plays in at this point in time is, I mean, we only are going to get so many of these. You never know what could happen with how what the history his body has had and the mileage he's taken on. You never really know how many more chances he's going to get at being a real contender, I would say, because once you get past a certain age, there's really a cutoff, in my opinion. But that's the biggest thing. The second thing is um, there's a group of major winners who are from between the ages 23 and 28 who haven't won a Masters yet, but have played extremely well in the Masters. I'm talking about the Cam Smiths of the world, the John Rahms, uh, Justin Thomas, all those types of players. Justin Thomas isn't quite as young as the other two, but you understand the point. I mean, there's a group of elite young players that have consistently done well in the Masters, but for one reason or another haven't been able to get it done. I'm looking at them to see if they can get it done in the biggest tournament of the year in a lot of these players' eyes.
Yeah, Tiger's always the biggest draw. People are going to be following him. I think the thing with Tiger to be watching this week is there is an expectation that there is going to be some colder, rainy weather going into like Friday night and Saturday morning. So if he does make the cut, which I think he's good enough to make the cut, and I hope he does because it's always fun watching him on the weekend. How does that weather affect his body? Because from the waist down, he's basically made of, a bunch of metal rods. It's tough for him to sustain it over 4 rounds of play. It's not that he can't compete with most of these guys in like an individual round or go low on one particular day. He can absolutely do that. He's still capable of that. But how does the conditions going into the weekend where there is an expectation that there could be some inclement weather, the course could be drier, a little bit, it could be slower as the course gets damp. I think Tiger wants it to be hard and fast. I think that's what his ideal condition would be, but I'm just interested to see how he actually adapts to those conditions if we actually get those conditions. I feel like we talk about this every year at the Masters, but I think this is Rory's 8th or 9th time now that he's
Ninth, yeah.
trying to complete the career Grand Slam. And I think, I've been watching golf, start to finish in a season like I had maybe the past 2 years, going all the way back to like the 2010s. But if you look at the way that Rory is playing right now, I would argue this is the best that he's been playing in the preceding 3 months leading up to the Masters than he has been in a bunch of past years where there may have been an expectation that he could contend at Augusta. So, I mean, you look at what he's done this year; he's playing really well. So that's always a big storyline. Also, only I believe 3 players have gone back to back at Augusta National. No one has accomplished a feat in over 2 decades since Tiger did it in 2001, 2002. So that's over 20 years. So, of course, Scotty Scheffler with the ace at the par 3 contest today, he will be looking to defend his championship. And that's always a storyline. Who's defending their title at the major the following year after they win. And then the final one is just, what do all these live players look like? I mean, I
Yeah.
watched a little bit of Brooks Koepka. I watched some Dustin Johnson. I'm interested to see Cam Smith, arguably the best player right now on the Live Tour and the last major winner at the Open last year. So I'm interested to see, because unless you're watching the Live Tour, you don't really know the current form of a lot of these guys. And one other thing that caught my eye when I was looking at the feature groupings, it's funny, they didn't put any of the lived guys with like the big featured groupings with like the big PGA Tour players. They were all sectioned off into like separate groupings with not as notable names in those groupings if you look at the featured groupings for the first 2 days. So, I mean, there's a lot to be looking forward to. I believe it's 18 Live Tour players in the field this week. And so it'll be interesting to see what that dynamic and how that changes possibly going into the weekend. If we do get like maybe a Sunday pairing, one of the final pairings is like a PGA guy and a live guy. That'd be pretty fun. So there are a bunch of storylines going into Augusta this year. The weather, live versus PGA, Tiger, uh, can Scheffler defend his title, Rory trying to go for the Grand Slam once again. It all works together. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and pull up our tiers, and we're going to explain how this works. Um, so I'm going to, oops, I will share my screen so we can pull up our tiers. And since I'm going to go first pick in our mock draft a little later, our NFL alternating mock draft, I will let you have the honors um, for picking first. I'm not sure if that worked or not. Can you see my screen? Oh, there we
Yep.
go.
Got it now. All right.
There we go.
Well, I had a game plan going into it. So no, I had chosen basically no matter what pick I got, I was going to go with John Rahm. I think his track record at Augusta speaks for itself. He's finished in the top 10 pretty much every year he's played in the event, and he's consistently in contention. And I just think this course fits his eye. It's hard to explain because he plays a fade, and normally this course is a draw course. But I think for him specifically, with how far he hits the ball and the way he can flight his shots into a lot of these greens, and control his spin and control his misses, um, I think this is the year where he's right in the mix once again.
That's a good pick. I'm going to go with Scotty Scheffler. the defending champion. And I don't necessarily need him to win. I just need him to put up a good performance. I think you could definitely see him in the top 10. He's playing really well. He's not phased by the moment. He's going to try to defend his title. He's pretty adaptable to all situations that he's been put in so far throughout his career. I think uh, he's a good putter for the most part, especially within 10 feet. And he's been one of the better players on tour so far this year. He's in good form. So I'm going to go with Scotty Scheffler there. So that brings us to tier number 2. Who you got?
For tier number 2, I'm gonna go with Xander Schauffele. Um, Recently in the match play, his last outing on the PGA Tour, um, he got beat by Rory in that match where Rory made like almost 100 feet of putts. But if you watch the way he played specifically, I mean, he's in as good a form as anybody on tour, and he's consistently good in the majors. So I just think in this sense, for a game like this, I think he's a reliable pick.
Absolutely. I'm debating between two, Cam Smith and Morikawa. I think I'm going to go Morikawa. I haven't seen Cam Smith play in a while. Uh, Look, he's having not so great of a season by Morikawa standards, a guy who's already won 2 majors and won a lot already in his young career. But I think he's pretty close to putting it all together. He started the calendar year off on fire, getting out to a huge lead at the Century Tournament of Champions. He finished third at the Farmers Insurance Open and tied 6th at the Genesis, while also leading at some points during the Players' Championship. For him, it's really been the putter. I think if he can get some confidence going with the putter, he could post a low number. It'll be interesting to see how the weather might affect all of these players going into the weekend and what that might look like for moving day, because moving day on Saturday is really when the weather is supposed to be at its worst. But I do think Morikawa is pretty close to putting it together. He's gained more than 8 strokes from tee to green in 3 out of his last 6 events, and over 9 strokes on approach at the Players' Championship. He's a really good ball striker, so I like that. And his past 2 starts at Augusta, 2021 tied 18th, and then he finished 5th last year. So he's had some success already at Augusta. So I think he could be a guy that's not necessarily in his best form right now, but could put it all together this week. So I'm going to go with
Yeah,
Morikawa.
definitely got to bet on talent there in these top 2 tiers, and he probably has one of my favorite swings on the entire tour. But for my next pick in tier 3, I'm gonna go with Cameron Young. He's coming off a second place finish in the WGC match play, and he's as soon as he made it onto the tour, he's been a top tier ball striker from the moment he made it on tour, and he's just been extremely consistent as well. So that's kind of a theme I wanted to go with is guys who consistently get top 25 finishes, because that was what I felt was my best bet to win this little competition we're doing.
Okay, that's a good philosophy. Ball striking is very important at this event. Um, so I'm trying to catch up. What I'm going to do, guys, is on the Raw Prospect Podcast Twitter account, I'm going to post our picks from each tier uh, later tonight after we record this episode. And then after each day, I'm going to update the tweet uh, for where our players are at in their total score. So you guys can kind of keep track of where we stand in our competition as we move through the Masters. That's a good pick. For me, this might surprise some people a little bit for the more casual golf fans. I'm going to go with Sung J M. He's a guy that I think, well, first of all, he's already had a lot of success at Augusta, tied second and tied 8th at the Masters on his resume already. He's one of the better young players that doesn't get enough attention on tour, I don't think. He's played well overall this season. He hasn't really contended for any wins as of late, but he has 2 top sixes in his last 6 tournaments. And he's gained 5.78 strokes or more from tee to green in 4 of those last 6 events. I think he's similar to Morikawa at the cusp of putting it all together. And I think he is a guy, even if it does not work out this week, I think he's a guy that you could see break through with a major win fairly soon. I think he's got that talent. So I'm going to go with Sungjae Im as my tier 3 pick.
Yeah, that's a good pick. There was a lot of interesting talent in that tier, particularly Tyrrell Hatton. That was one I was thinking about as well. Oh wait, no, that's in this next tier is what I mean. In this next tier is a lot of interesting picks you can make. Tyrrell Hatton, Matt Fitzpatrick, Corey Connors is a guy who's played well at Augusta before. But for my pick, I'm going to go with Matt Fitzpatrick, the reigning U.S. Open champion. With the renovations they made this year, with making the course longer, Matt Fitzpatrick has proven that he's one of the more long hitters on tour with the speed training he's done. And I think as long as the putter can match the rest of his game, I think he'll be right there in the mix.
I'm going to go with Tyrell Hatton. I think you mentioned him. Mm-hmm. It just seems to me that he's been in contention and playing really good golf so far this season. He always seems to be hanging around. Hasn't really broke through yet. I'm sort of sticking with my theme of like guys that I think are getting closer to winning. And so I think he's just a solid all-around player, it seems like. So I'm going to go with Tyrell Hatton. And he's had success in majors before. He's been up on leaderboards before. So I'm going to take a flyer on Tyrell Hatton.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good pick. For tier 5, I think the pick that would be, simple, I guess, is going with Tiger, but I think I'm going to steer away from that. I'm going to go with Mito Pereira. If you think about what's on the line for some of these live guys, and him specifically, if he's going to be eligible to play in upcoming majors in following seasons, he has to do well. I think the cutoff is if you get a top 8 finish in the Masters, you get to play in the following Masters the following year. So there's a lot on the line there. And I think, Mito Pereira, what he's shown is that he's a world-class ball striker. I mean, rarely misses greens, is extremely reliable with any iron in his hand. And the question will always become, what will he be able to, do on the weekend if he's in the mix? Because we saw what happened, obviously, in the PGA last year.
Okay. Yeah. Mito Pereira is a guy that's been around for a little bit now, and he's played really good golf. I'm going to go with Tiger's the obvious one, right? But I'm just not sure he's going to be able to sustain good play for the entirety of 4 days. I think I'm debating between Tom Kim, who's played really well as of late, and Siwoo Kim, but I think I'm going to lean towards Siwoo Kim, who's been putting really well since November. He has a win under his belt in January at the Sony Open. He's been excellent off the tee, so I like that. Getting 1.35 strokes or more off the tee in each of his last 4 events. He's made 5 straight cuts, so he's in pretty good form. He's had success at Augusta, tied 12th in 2021. I think he'll play well, along with my other guy, Sungjae Im. I think I'm taking a flyer a little bit, but um, I like I like that pick. So
Okay. Yeah.
we were gonna do three guys from tier 6. I'm not sure we should do that. Maybe we do one or two though. What do you think?
Um, I think one or two would be okay.
Yeah.
I have one player in mind, Chris Kirk. He's a guy who won the Honda Classic earlier this season, has had a top 5 finish following that as well last week. And I just think his game has really come together at the right time. Um, you know, it's not a great pick in terms of experience. That's one thing players always talk about is experience really matters at Augusta National, and having that knowledge of where to miss and where to play off of slopes. But I think with Chris Kirk in particular, I think he's playing good enough golf to be able to overcome that.
This is an interesting tier. I feel like there's a lot of guys in this tier that you could see up on top of the leaderboards at the end of like round 2, maybe even round 3. Um, I mean, I feel like Louis Oosthuizen always finds himself in the mix in these events, but I'm actually going to go with one of the younger guys that I really like, uh, and that's Sahith Theegala. I feel like he's got a pretty well-rounded game. I'm taking a little bit of a flyer, but I think he's bound to have his coming out party, so to speak, and play really well at one of these majors. I'm not really sure how many majors he's actually played in. I'd have to look that up, but yeah, he's a newer guy on tour, and I think he could potentially play well. But at this point, I mean, I'm just asking him to make the cut and maybe get into the red. So, um, yeah, maybe we do one more pick each.
Yeah, yeah, I'm cool with that. For my last pick, I think I'm going to go with. It's really tough, but I'm going to go with Cameron Champ for my last pick. Over the last couple of years at the Masters, he's I think third in overall birdies made with a list of guys that have a amazing track record at that tournament. And so those are some of the biggest stars on tour. So clearly he has, you know, an eye for Augusta National. There's no question about that. And he's led the league in driving distance the past couple of years. He just has natural power off the tee. And I think I'm just kind of going to rely on um, his, good feelings around Augusta National.
Okay, I like that. Okay, so Cameron Champ. I'm writing all these picks down. I'm gonna go. I mean, Kirk Kitayama is a guy that's impressed so far this year. He won a couple weeks ago. I can't remember what tournament it was, but he did win.
I believe it was the
Um,
Arnold Palmer.
Arnold Palmer. That's right. Um, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna take a flyer, and I'm gonna take my guy, uh, Harold Varner III. For no
Okay,
reason or other than I just really like Harold Varner III.
fair enough.
So I'm gonna take him. So that completes our 2023. And by the way, give credit to FanDuel for these tiers. These uh, tiers were put together by FanDuel. So I'd be remiss if I didn't give credit to the creator of the content. But our 2023 Masters draft and Masters preview is now complete. Is there any parting shots? Anything else you want to get out? A prediction to possibly win the tournament, a bold prediction, anything else that we should say before we move on to our NFL stuff?
Um, the last thing I'll say is I'm going to be rooting for Rory to win. I think him switching over to the blade putter 2 weeks ago at the match play I think ultimately that will be a good decision just because he's won all his majors with a blade, and his putting stats immediately, got better. He was immediately putting much, much better with that blade putter. And whether that transitions over to Augusta, we'll have to see it. But um, I'll be hoping for a good week from Rory.
Yeah, I will too. Been talking to my dad, and we both think we're both just been waiting for a couple of years now for Rory to get the career Grand Slam. I think if he's gonna do it, this year might be one of his best chances to do it because
Right.
of his form preceding, coming into Augusta. So yeah, I mean, Rory is there. It'd obviously be great as a Longhorn to see potentially Spieth get back into the major win column as he was in tier one. And it's funny, he's actually won on Eastern Sunday. The past two Eastern Sundays, he's won the events that have occurred on those Easter Sundays. It's an obscure stat or nugget that I've seen the past couple of days. So it'd be nice to see one of the Longhorns get back in the win column, whether Scheffler repeats or Spieth gets his second ever win at Augusta, as he has played well as pretty much anyone at Augusta since when he has his putter going. He can this course, like, he could run away with it if he gets that putter going. So yeah, I mean, and then just watching the live guys, I think is going to be interesting because we haven't seen them play in a while unless you've been watching the live tour.
Right.
Okay.
One last thing I'll say is in the thread for that tweet where we're going to have our players posted, um, I'm going to put the picture of that player pool. So if you want to participate in our player pool, I'm sure if you're listening, you're probably participating in other stuff as well. But if you want to participate in our player pool, leave a tweet in that thread with your 7 picks.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. All right. We are on a good pace, 28 minutes, and we're already done with our Masters content. So we have a full 30 to 45 minutes to do what is going to be our first mock draft of the season. The way this is going to work, I think we have a lower third for it.
Right.
Basically, I have the odds, so I'll have 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, and then Emmy will have 2. He'll have all the evens. And so we're going to pull up our PFF, give credit to PFF, our mock draft simulator. So I'm going to share my screen once again. And we're just going to alternate picks. So this should be a fun segment. I think there can be some good back and forth conversations. It might take a minute for the there we
There we
go.
go. Here, I'll turn off the lower third. Okay.
All right, so you see it here again. We're only going top 10. We will have more mock drafts in the coming weeks. In fact, I think we're going to be doing individual team mock drafts on our Patreon. So be sure to check that out. We should have an episode up by the weekend on our Patreon where we're going to go into depth into our teams, respectively, the Cowboys and the Steelers. Then we'll go through maybe some other teams. If you guys have teams that you want us to go through, let us know. You can reach out to us on social media or leave a comment under this live stream. Do whatever you need to do. We love to get more fan interaction, per se. Are we ready for this draft?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm going to pull up my little big board here just so I am ready. So I have the first pick. I'm picking for the Carolina Panthers. Let me start the draft. Make sure this works. We did a test run last night. Okay. I have the first pick. Look, we need a quarterback. I need a quarterback that can come in and win right away. This is a roster that's ready to win. And personally, I don't think the size is too much of a concern for Bryce Young. 5'10", whatever he is, 190. He will, I think, get a little stronger and put on some more weight when he gets to the league. He's a guy that I think has the potential to be a force multiplier in terms of creation outside the pocket, making people better. But I just want a guy who can make the throws from the pocket, has a strong arm, has the prototypical body for an NFL quarterback. Carolina, we've made investments into our offensive line. We just signed a veteran in Adam Thielen, who's still a pretty solid, like number 2 wide receiver in this league when he's healthy. We have some other weapons, although we did trade away DJ Moore. I like our running game with Hubbard and their other running back. What's his name? The guy out of Texas, or did he sign somewhere else in free agency? I'm not sure, but
I
I
believe he
like
did. Yep.
I like this running game regardless. And I just need a guy that can make all the throws. And I think CJ Stroud's that guy. So I am going to go CJ Stroud for the Carolina Panthers at number 1.
Okay. Um, at number 2, this makes it very interesting. I had mentioned last night to you that I think there is a possibility where the Texans don't draft a quarterback this year. I think that's a very real possibility just because they want to make sure that that roster is 100% ready to win when the rookie quarterback gets there. And there's also the fact that Caleb Williams is sitting at USC kind of waiting in the wings to be that number 1 overall pick in next year's draft. So um, that's worth considering, absolutely. But I think here in this draft, I'm going to go with Bryce Young. I think he fits with what that offense is going to want to do with the Kyle Shanahan, bootlegs. They're going to try to get him moving outside of the pocket. And also, I've been, critical of his size on past podcasts in our big board series, but I've kind of come around on it. I think the NFL has changed enough to where it may not matter as much. And I think Bryce Young is elusive enough and crafty enough to be able to find his throwing windows, especially in the middle of the field, because that's where the main concerns lie. So, for those reasons, I'm going with Bryce Young.
Okay. Number 3, Arizona. They got to go defense, in my opinion. They're not really in a position this year to put themselves in contention, I don't think, no matter what they do in this draft. But they got to build up this defense. It was really lacking from a pass rush standpoint. I mean, J.J. Watt just retired. And ever since they lost Chandler Jones, they just need to beef up their front 7, regardless, whether that be Jalen Carter or potentially Will Anderson, or maybe even they take a flyer on Tyree Wilson, who I think some people are pretty high on. But I think, in my opinion, I'm going to go the safer route, I think, and I'm going to go Will Anderson for the Cardinals. I feel like this is a pretty common pick that you see in mock drafts. So let me go ahead and select them for Arizona. They need an edge rusher. He could be a good foundational piece. And Jonathan Gannon, who really I think is going to want to build up that defense. If you look at the history with the Eagles, they've loved the Alabama and Georgia, the big type physical prototype edge rushers out of the SEC. I think he gives this team a blue chip talent to build around on that defense. And I think he's going to be a guy that they plug and play from the get-go and is going to give you some solid production right away. I'm not sure if he'll be as productive as like maybe Aiden Hutchinson was last year in his rookie season for Detroit. But I think he could be pretty similar. And anything I think could be an upgrade from what they got last year from a pass rush standpoint. He's got infinite upside. He's twitchy. He's hyper productive during college, which I also look for. Explosive first step. I've just loved Will Anderson ever since he broke onto the scene 2 years ago at Bama. So I'm going to go Will Anderson, a foundational piece on the Arizona defense for Jonathan Gannon, the new head coach.
Okay. Yeah. I like that. I like that selection. Um, for me at number four, this is where things get a little bit interesting. I thought about a possible, trade down with possibly a team like the Detroit Lions, who are also in the market for possibly Anthony Richardson. But at this pick, I think I'm going to stay pat and select Will Levis. For me personally, I don't think. For me personally, I don't have Will Levis above Anthony Richardson. However, I think the Colts organization, I think they want a pocket passer, and as we know, their owner is involved in not really involved, but overseeing all of the decision making, for better or for worse. So I think he's going to see that arm talent and that potential, and go for Will Levis.
Okay, I like that. Um, I think for sake of simplicity, we'll just exclude trades for
Right.
today. So first four picks: C.J. Stroud to the Panthers, Bryce Young to the Texans, Will Anderson Jr. to the Arizona Cardinals, and Will Levis at number 4 to Indianapolis. Seattle, I think this is really where it gets interesting. They need to go. I mean, they solidified their tackle position in last year's draft. They had a fantastic draft last year, and now they end up, because of the Russell Wilson trade, lucking out, getting to this number 5 position. And I think you have a real opportunity now if you're Seattle. I think they have 2 firsts, maybe 2 seconds, third, or something along those lines. They have a lot of picks this year due to that Russell Wilson deal. Um, Look, I'm debating between Jalen Carter and potentially a Tyree Wilson. Uh, they still they're still missing something up front. I feel like they could still beef up that middle interior, but I'm gonna take a shot at Tyree Wilson. I think it's a big position of need. Um, Big physical 3 down edge defender, really productive at Texas Tech. He's got really good length, tremendous power, uh, and he'll give Seattle, I think, a playmaker on the edge, infinite upside. He's got a relentless motor. Um, I think his motor sort of reminds me, like his talent sort of reminds me of Jadeveon Clowney in a sense. Uh, he's got, he can line up anywhere. He's going to give them versatility. I think Pete Carroll likes that. So I was debating between Carter and Wilson, but I'm gonna go Tyree Wilson at 5 to Seattle. I know they selected a guy out of Texas Tech a couple years ago, and that experiment didn't work out. Jordan something, but I think they go to the well again and get a really talented player in Tyree Wilson. Did we lose Emmy? Oh, there you are. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah,
All right.
my screen froze, so I was trying to mess with buttons to see if I could fix it again. Sorry about that. Keep going.
No, I finished. I
Okay,
went with
okay,
Tyree Wilson. So you're up. Detroit number 6.
okay. This pick, I think there's a lot of different avenues Detroit can take, and I think that's the power of being able to go out in free agency and get a CJ Gardner Johnson and all those defensive backs that they needed. But even so, I think there is a real possibility of going out and getting another corner in Devon Witherspoon. That's a guy I've considered at this pick. Anthony Richardson, I really like a lot at this pick as well. But I think for Detroit, with their current situation, I would rather make my selections um, in the first couple of rounds and then maybe get a project type quarterback in the third round and maybe a DTR, Dorian Thompson Robinson, or someone like that. So I'm just going to stay pat and make my selection a non quarterback. And I'm going to go with Devon Witherspoon. I think he's the number, like, no question, the number one corner in this class. I mean, his tape is unreal. The physical tools and just the technique in any coverage you want. They played pretty much everything at Illinois from, zone, man, press bail, uh, uh, everything you can think of. So I'm going to go with Devon Witherspoon here at number 6.
Okay, I like that. Really good corner. And look, I'm frothing at the mouth, if you will, for the Steelers to get one of these corners in the first round. They're at 17. They might have to end up trading up to get there. As we think around this time is where we're entering that territory where you could start seeing a run of corners come off the board. So yeah, I really like that pick for Detroit. You get CJ Gardner-Johnson. You're trying to build up that defense. You have what's the guy's name out of the other corner that they selected a couple years ago or a year ago?
Jeff
Uh,
Okuda.
Jeff Okuda, exactly, out of Ohio State. Okay, that puts me in an interesting position with the Raiders at number 8 because I think there's an interesting avenue they could potentially explore getting a guy like Anthony Richardson to just simmer behind and learn from Jimmy Garoppolo. I feel like that could be a pretty interesting. I don't know if Anthony Richardson's a guy that's ready to come in and contribute right away. You have Garoppolo on what is it, a 3-year deal. But at the same time, it's like, do you really want to invest this particular pick in a quarterback that's really not going to play for you right away? Or do you want to get immediate contributors that you can build around? So I'm really debating between, I mean, their offensive line has been an issue now for years. They could really use maybe a guy like Peter Skronsky. But I feel like this defense has also been an issue. Uh, and I think Clelin Ferrell left in free agency.
Yeah.
They need to beef up this defensive line. And I know there are some concerns with potentially the character of Jalen Carter, but he's one of these freaks that comes out of Georgia. And if you've seen the track record of guys that have come out of Georgia the past couple of years, what do you want to say?
Um, there was a report that actually came out earlier today that the Raiders had already ruled off Jalen Carter off of their draft boards. I think probably because of their track record with first round picks these past few years. But you can still make that pick, but just keep that in mind.
Well, considering that they have taken him off their draft board, I don't know. I just feel like, do you want to? It's tough. You could also go with a guy like Christian Gonzalez at this pick, I think. I mean, he's one of the better corners in this draft out of Oregon. Really like his length, his athleticism. But it's not their draft. It's not about their draft board. It's about my draft board. So I'm still gonna go Jalen Carter.
Okay. Yeah. That's the best player available. There's no question about it. I think I agree with that pick, regardless of what the Raiders think of that decision. Okay, so now that leaves me at number 8 with the Atlanta Falcons. Um, it kind of leaves me in a interesting spot just because I know that the Falcons want to give Desmond Ritter a shot. There's no question about that. And it would have been nice to see him play a few more games than he got to play. But this is what we would do mock draft. And what I would do is draft a guy who has incredible upside and is clearly has shown flashes of playing within the pocket. He clearly is a guy who wants to be able to play within the pocket. And he's shown the flashes of being able to do that. I like his throwing motion. He's able to throw at multiple arm angles. His creativity on the football field. I think you throw Anthony Richardson into this offense under Arthur Smith, and you could see a extremely potent offense right away.
So you went Anthony Richardson?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. I like it. I like it for the Falcons. Arthur Smith is one of the better offensive minds, I think, in football right now. And you give, I think, Kyle Pitts, some of the weapons that they have. I mean, I really like that. Now, I think for the Bears, you traded back, you acquired some good. You have a lot of draft capital now. I believe they have another pick in the first round, or am I thinking wrong? I think I'm thinking wrong, but they do have, I think, a couple seconds,
right,
and maybe a couple thirds as well. I mean, yes, they probably could stand to get a receiver. It's been a need for a while. I think they could use another one. They got DJ Moore though, so I don't think you go receiver right here. You could use a corner, but I think I'm gonna go Peter Skronsky, the offensive lineman out of Northwestern. He's just solid in the run game, solid pass protector, as solid as it gets. I think he could be a stalwart on this offensive line, an immediate starter that's really solid for you in both the pass and the run game. You beef up your offensive line. He can play tackle or guard. Some people project him more as a guard because of his shorter arms, which that's an interesting conversation. But we can get more into the weeds of that down the line. I think you got to invest. If you're going to go with Justin Fields, which you are, you invest in this offensive line even more. It got a little better last year, but I think there still needs to be an investment in that position, and you build your team from the inside out. So I went with, I think, the best offensive lineman in this draft who's just going to be really solid. The question is, where does he fit along the offensive line? What position does he play?
Okay. Yeah, I love that pick. It's basically a guy you draft and is a fix-all at the offensive line. I think with Riley Reef as your swing tackle, I think I'd rather have Peter Skoronsky as my swing tackle, and if one of my tackles gets hurt, move Skoronsky to the tackle position and Reef inside or whatever the case may be. And the the position flexibility is what I think gives the most value, in my opinion, in terms of Peter Skoronsky. So I think for the Bears in particular, I really love that draft pick. Okay, now the final pick of our little 10-pick mock draft, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. And, I may be a Cowboys fan, but I am fair. I'm not going to, sell the pick. I'm not going to do anything stupid. We're very unbiased here at the Raw Prospect Podcast, and I'm going to live up to that. For the Eagles, they have such an incredible team. I think you look to reinvigorate the pipelines for certain positions. I think you look particularly at the offensive line. You look at defensive back, corner, or safety with the loss of CJ Gardner-Johnson and the potential loss of some of these corners in the future as they get older. So at this spot, I've considered a couple of different guys. One, Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon, a guy I mentioned on our Big Board episode, who I think his fluidity at 6'2", like 205 pounds, is absolutely incredible. And one thing we talk about with corners a lot is route squeeze, is basically when a receiver comes out of their break and creates a little bit of separation. Route squeeze is how quickly the corner can close that gap. And Christian Gonzalez has some of the best route squeeze I've ever seen out of a corner. But the other pick I was considering is Brian Branch out of Alabama, the safety. He's basically a safety slash slot corner. He can play either, and is fantastic in the run game. But I think here I'm going to go with positional value in corner. I think this is a generational cornerback class. If you haven't looked into this draft much, I think that's the one thing that people should know is this cornerback class. These top 4 or 5 guys are absolutely incredible. I'm going to go with Christian Gonzalez here at number 10.
I love it. And speaking of corners, I mean, oh, see what it's doing? It's simulating the picks, and we have some teams that have repeat picks from within the top 10. But here's our top 10 mock draft. CJ Stroud, number 1 to the Panthers. Bryce Young, number 2 to the Houston Texans. 2 quarterbacks off the board right off the bat, which I think is what a lot of people expect. Will Anderson, solid foundational piece in that defense for Arizona to build on. Will Levis to the Colts. And new head coach Shane Steichen. Tyree Wilson, the talented edge rusher out of Texas Tech, to Seattle. Devin Witherspoon, potentially, I think, the best corner in this class, to the Detroit Lions to continue to build upon what they've already got this offseason in that secondary. Jalen Carter, although the actual teams may have doubts, he was the best available at that pick, so I went with Jalen Carter to the Raiders. Anthony Richardson, an interesting mix between his talents and Arthur Smith in Atlanta. Peter Skronsky beefing up the offensive line in Chicago. And then Christian Gonzalez, another a corner to sort of build on what they have there in Philly, as they have lost, CJ Gardner-Johnson. And, they need to not revamp this defense, but you got to supplement guys, and they've drafted really well. So, I mean, I really like that pick for Philly. 52 minutes in, we did this in a pretty efficient manner. I'm really impressed. I think potentially next week, we might go top 20 mock draft. We might spice it up a little. We might do some trades. It'll be pretty similar to this. Maybe I do the evens next time and you do the odds. We can get our different perspectives, but we go a little further, and that's all we do during the episode. It's just the mock draft, because I really like doing this now that we can share our screen and use PFF's mock draft similar. I think it worked really well. So, yeah, we'll have more mock drafts coming. Any parting shots?
The one parting shot I'd say is don't underrate Tyree Wilson this draft class. I think in terms of pass rushers, a lot of attention has been thrown on Will Anderson, and rightfully so. But Tyree Wilson is absolutely fantastic, and I think has a very similar athletic profile to the number 1 pick in last year's draft, Trayvon Walker. So definitely don't underrate Tyree Wilson, and keep an eye on him, because some teams may be higher on him than even we are.
Right. And another thing Emmy and I have considered is doing like a what if, like scenario type segment for some of these teams that we haven't really talked much about. We did the big board segment for the Panthers and the Texans. We talked a lot about those 2 teams. We were going to do a segment on the Cardinals and the Colts, but we kind of covered that in this mock draft. I like this. We're going to do more of these, maybe one every week up until the draft, in different variations. We'll try to switch it up, keep it fresh going forward. So, yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode. I think my parting shot would just be enjoy the Masters. It's one of the best sporting events every year. I think it's in my top 3 for sure. So enjoy the Masters. And yeah, we'll be back with Patreon content later this week. Before we sign off, let me just stop. And I will also post our top 10 mock draft on our Twitter account as well. So be on the lookout for that if you want to. And give us your mock drafts. We love to see those as well. We like different perspectives, and we want more fan engagement. So let me stop sharing, and we can sign off. All right, there we go. All right, so that's gonna do it. Under an hour, 55 minutes, really efficient. And we'll see you this weekend for a Patreon podcast.
Yeah.
So
Peace out, y'all.
yeah, peace out.
Oh, just do the going
Oh,
yon thing. Yeah.
um, I don't really have one today. Do you
Okay,
have?
I got one. I got one. Just like the potential of Jalen Carter going number 1 overall. We are going, gone.
There you go. Peace out.